It's all about...
Hey! Megan, turn off.
Recalibrating response model. Megan! What's wrong with you? Don't worry, Katie. I won't let anything harm you. Ever again. It's nice to have a friend.
And today we have Megan. Blumhouse. Or Bloomhouse, I don't know. Some people have fancier ways of saying it. With Blumhouse, it's one of those production companies that you hear the name, right? Even average film goers, they hear the name. And I don't know about you, but like, Blumhouse is not synonymous with consistent quality for me. Like more often than not, the films they choose to back are the definition of hit or miss. And I think that's largely in part due to the fact that Blumhouse, no matter how good, no matter how bad, the cast, the actors, the setting, the story, no matter how bad it is, it's almost always taken super seriously, and oftentimes it works to the film's detriment. Now there are some exceptions. Every now and then Blumhouse puts out like a pretty good one or a really good one. But then they just will eventually milk it into different sequels, or will then put out a stinker and just, I don't know. I don't associate Blumhouse with consistent quality. Then you have a film like Megan here that just came out this year in a very fitting manner. This is the first 2023 movie that I'm reviewing this year, and you know what? Normally they're pretty big pieces of shit, but you know, this one actually is very fitting. I'll take this as the first 2023 release review for me. The premise is surprisingly straightforward. You have a little girl who loses her family in a car wreck, and then her aunt, and she's like, I don't know how to take care of kids. I don't know how to help out this little girl. What can I do? I work in robotics, and I'm working on this project, AI android that's meant to be a children's toy to develop and help raise them, protect them, teach them, and be there for them. And sure enough, you have Megan. And then the only downside to that is now this little robot's growing up, like, I won't let anybody hurt you ever again. Like, and that turns into any possible threats that are incoming. This robot becomes malicious in intent. But the kicker, as this AI develops, it gets like sassy, it starts covering its tracks, it starts being like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And it evolves into something that's more entertaining. And from what everybody online started losing their minds, because little robots in there on the trailer just getting into the fucking TikTok dances and all this. Might as well be doing one of those in the background, and just, you can tell that it was going to be a fun movie, not a scary movie. Maybe a little bit creepy if you got a major phobia of dolls, but nothing like what Annabelle and its ilk attempts to accomplish. The director of Megan is a Gerard Johnston, who you wouldn't know him. I didn't know him. Aside from some various short films, he did a film called Housebound. I've never heard of in my life, but that was almost a decade ago. So I mean, this guy's not making a lot. From what I can tell, he has worked with Blumhouse in the past in terms of like more writer credits and just kind of working on or towards film. But this is probably his biggest directorial debut. But he's not a name. I don't think he's a name you're gonna remember like in T-minus 6 months, you know. Before I start the cast is mostly like unmemorable, I suppose. There's a couple names here and there you might recognize. I think the guy that's the programmer is in some other stuff that my friend pointed out to me that is cool and good. And the little girl who does all the work for Megan, I mean, she, you know, slayed, for lack of a better term. I don't know how else to say it. She slayed, sure. But I mean, I don't know. There weren't any like amazing or even like, you know, heart-wrenching performances. Everybody was just kind of plugged into this movie to do their job. It works really well for what it is. But only literally the glue of this film is Megan. It is this character. And by the time Act 3 rolls around, I loved it. I wish we got more of Act 3 Megan, just because it's very engaging, entertaining, funny, malicious. I'd say violence, but this is like PG-13 violence. If they were able to have given this film an R rating, they could have gone even deeper into it, and it would have been even more fun, because that's what you're kind of here for, is like I would be here to watch, you know, evolving GLaDOS-ian android start killing and mutilating and trying to protect its sole operator. But yeah, Megan is definitely the best part of Megan. Hands down, she's the most entertaining part. She's the most interesting part. I always like films that tackle subjects like AI that are starting to gain more sentience, starting to evolve more, and starting to almost kind of write their own code and prerogative. That's always really fascinating, and they actually executed it surprisingly well in this film. The ant and the little girl, like they hold it together well enough. I wasn't like, oh my god, I hope they survive. I wasn't rooting for them per se in the film, but endearing enough and interesting enough where I was at least curious to see where their story went. I kind of wanted things to go well for them, but again, honestly, I wasn't here at the movie for them. Which brings me to the cons of the film. You're not going to see Megan for the powerhouse acting performances over overall production value. Everything having to do with Megan herself and like all the robotics going into her, that I think is where a primary amount of the budget went in terms of making Megan look and sound the way that she does. And in the scenes that she's in, she looks great. And the stuff that happens around her looks great. But everything else in the movie, almost in an impressive amount, looks purposefully like movie sets. I don't know what it is about Blumhouse, but when it comes to the main star of the show, whatever it is, they always put their budget into that, and then everything else kind of becomes secondary. The acting chops become secondary, the settings and the set dressing and the production value all kind of become secondary to whatever the main crux of the story is. And normally you can kind of see past that in a film, but this one there's some scenes where it's like, okay, the lab looks like a lab, sure, but then you're in the hallway of what's supposed to be like a high-tech facility, and it just has these basic-ass red walls and minimal set design, and you're like, oh, well, this is definitely, we're on a movie set now. So I don't know about you, but that's the vibe that I got. All the actors do a serviceable job, but again, none of it's super important, interesting, or engaging. They're just kind of there to help forward along and service the narrative, and it's understandable and it works. It's just, again, not anything too crazy. I don't mind when you take some time, especially towards the beginning of your movie or TV series, to slow down and develop characters through scenes and through dialogue. Heaven knows we all watched the same first season of Breaking Bad. I still think it's great, but is it the strongest? No, but it's used for a lot of development. Similar to this, in the first act of Megan, there were some moments where in my head I was like, okay, I'm here for it. I'm observing and learning and picking up on, you know, all the very heavy-handed foreshadowing and character development, context clues and all that. But some people that I could see watching the first act, I could easily see how they might find it to be a bit on the slower side, a bit slower paced, and I wouldn't fault them for it. I get that. This is just a really weird case for this film, because although I feel like I have more negative to say than good, the good is very, very strong. Megan was a very, very entertaining film, borderline hilarious, and it's everything from just the mannerisms of this little robot has, to how it looks at people, how it can be malicious without even saying more than a couple words, just the delivery of the lines, and how as the film progresses, I think, you know, as the film progresses, it gets even better as this robot drops more and more of the facade to reveal its prime directive, and that becomes super entertaining and borderline Terminator by the end. That was the entertaining part for me. My only wish is that more of the film was centered around Megan and did that. But the film works for the very complaint that I normally have about Blumhouse films, is that this film does not take itself seriously. This is borderline this is basically a dark comedy. I will not consider this a horror film. Thriller at best, but by my standards, Megan is not horror. But it's a dark comedy thriller that was very entertaining, and it's almost as if Blumhouse succeeds better when you give us these borderline ridiculous premises and then just treat it as such. Like, we all know this is pretty silly, and the way this is going to happen is going to be pretty crazy. So, you know, we're going to treat it as such, and we're not going to take ourselves super seriously. It miraculously is this weird scientific formula where it has all the qualities of a film that normally shouldn't work, but it pulls through because of its core idea and how it handles its execution overall. I had a rating for this at first, and then I changed it just because I had to be like, you know what? I enjoyed it. If you like any of what I described, you might actually enjoy it too. and it was worth it just for Megan itself, or herself, or whatever. I don't know. In a very surprising turn of events, I would actually give Megan this is very low, but a very, 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 very low 4 out of 5. I would give it a low 4 out of 5, I gotta admit. I think if Megan weren't as strong in this movie as she is, it would easily just be a high 3 out of 5, like above average, but I gotta tell you, I was thoroughly entertained. Like I said, I love the scenes with Megan in them, and as she evolves and becomes more malicious and becomes more and more of a character, she kind of grows into the movie's title. She earns the title. I will gladly accept her into the Blumhouse Hall of Fame for all the different, the Purge here and the Purge here, the Malignance here, I'll accept her into that Hall of Fame of she now is solidified as one of the Blumhouse horror icons. This movie just works surprisingly well, and for that reason, credit where credit's due. If you want a fun time that's going to be a dark comedy thriller that isn't too terribly violent, maybe go see it in theaters, but otherwise, this honestly is a perfect film to stream later in the future when you have friends over for a fun, borderline dumb fun movie night. It's actually not bad. It's actually pretty fun, pretty funny. That's all I gotta say about Megan. Thank you guys and gals so much for watching. I'm actually pleasantly surprised. This was my first film I officially review of 2023, and here's for hopefully many more to come. So stay tuned for the next episode of whatever I review. Goodbye, travelers.